So first I'm going to say we're in the home of the word vegan. That word vegan was coined in the UK. And yet some of us as Jains feel that it's something foreign to us. And so I'm going to use both the word vegan, I'm going to use the word ahimsak diet, because I believe that they're synonymous. I think that the reason for Jains to be vegan is to follow the principle of ahimsa. And there's a few other aspects of the ahimsa diet that I'll cover besides veganism. So I'll start with that and then I'll delve right into the topic at hand. So violence to Panchindriya, which is 5 sense beings, is most important to us and is our rationale for vegetarianism. We already have in our teachings the concept of all life being mutually interdependent, parasparo pagraho jivanam. And I have a proposition. This is not scientific, this is philosophical. Do we really believe that nonviolence to others benefits the self spiritually and physically? Can science support this? Keeping in mind that science changes and religious interpretation changes. Acknowledging our limited viewpoint and anikantvad, which is multiplicity of viewpoints, let's see how far we get with current scientific studies and our understanding of the ahimsak diet and its nutritional benefits. So we are going to talk about vegetarianism, veganism. Another couple of aspects that I'll cover is caloric restriction, or unadhari, daytime eating, which is part of the strict Jain practice, and mindful eating, which is spoken about more in Buddhist circles these days, but I believe it's a central part of Jainism, although we don't call it that, we call it something else. So health benefits of vegetarianism and veganism. Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn is a cardiothoracic surgeon in the US. Dr. Dean Ornish is a cardiologist in the US. Both of them have shown the reversal of heart disease, as shown either clinically or by cardiac catheterization, that shows that blockages of the coronary arteries are reversed with a no-oil plant-based diet in the case of Dr. Esselstyn, and in the case of a low-fat vegetarian diet in the case of Dr. Ornish. There are at least two others, this is a sampling, but there's at least 2 others that have shown prevention of cancer. Dr. T. Colin Campbell has extrapolated animal research and the findings of an epidemiological study in China to suggest that moving to a plant-based diet will prevent or reverse cancer. And Dr. Neil Barnard is the leader of an organization called the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine based in the US, who has shown in a clinical study with people that people on a vegan diet have benefits in terms of prevention of cancer. Dr. Barnard also, in a clinical study, showed reversal of diabetes on a vegan diet. And Dr. Gabriel Cousins has a retreat center in the US in which he put people on raw vegan diets and reversed their diabetes. As Jains, we already avoid meat. Most of us avoid eggs. And we're maybe 80% of the way there to a healthy diet. So let's talk about how to go the next few steps. There's actually a book called The Daylight Diet, which is not Jain, but it's out there, and it recommends eating early in the day for optimal digestion and sleep. This is not mainstream science, but there are some observations that suggest that for our circadian rhythms, eating in the daily is better. It is well accepted that eating meals late when you don't have time to exercise afterward does lead to weight gain. That is well accepted. Eating less calories may reverse aging and prolong life. Mainstream science has taken note of animal research showing this, and it is consistent with our practices of unodari, which is eating less than being full, and our practices of fasting. We also, as Asian Indians, have a unique risk factor profile for heart disease. A researcher named Dr. Enos, who's a cardiologist based in the US, has called Indian vegetarianism a form of contaminated vegetarianism. Most Asian Indians are lacto-ovo vegetarians, so we consume milk, unlike Western vegetarians. About 50% of Asian Indians are vegetarians, but the lipoprotein levels, these are bound to cholesterol, and rates of diabetes and coronary artery disease are no different from that of non-vegetarians. So how could this be that we have these studies showing reversal of heart disease in, Americans or Europeans, and yet for Asian Indians, we have high rates of diabetes and coronary artery disease? And why? Indian vegetarians consume excessive amounts of saturated and trans fatty acids. In a Canadian study, Asian Indians consume more fried foods and high-fat dairy products, such as full-fat milk, than white Canadians. Although the intake of fat is 20 to 25% energy in most Asian countries, affluent Asian Indians consume almost 50% or more than 50% of their calories from fat. So there's something about what we're eating in addition to vegetarianism that's making our risk factors worse. We're consuming liberal amounts of bakery products, butter, ghee, cheese, ice cream, curd, and other dairy products to compensate for not eating meat. And contrary to popular belief, dairy products are the major source of saturated fatty acids, even in the Western diet. Saturated fatty acid intake from high-fat dairy products increase LDL levels 3 times as much as they raise the HDL level. Prolonged cooking of vegetables, as is practiced in India, virtually destroys every nutrient before it is consumed. And a major problem overlooked in the Indian diet is the high glycemic load, which I'll talk about later on. This results in high triglyceride and low HDL levels. There appears to be a threshold for carbohydrate consumption. If you're taking more than 280 grams per day, this can result in atherogenic dyslipidemia. So that is plaques in the arteries that can result in heart disease. Part of this story is our obsession with SOS, salt, oil, and sugar. Now this is not just Indians, like all of us love SOS. According to Alan Goldhammer, who's a writer for The Pleasure Trap, our brains crave these foods as an old survival mechanism. And the chemical called dopamine is stimulated by having foods high in salt, oil, and sugar. The Barker hypothesis states that in places like India, where food may have been scarce in previous generations, people now exposed to high-calorie food have increased rates of metabolic syndrome, these diseases that we talked about earlier, diabetes, heart disease, and hypertension. And merchants, of course, feed our addiction to these substances to sell their products. Trans fat is made in the manufacturing process, salt and sugar is hidden in our food. Indian snacks often have palm oil, one of the few vegan sources of saturated fat. Coconut oil, coconut milk is another source. Once we start decreasing the use of salt, oil, and sugar, we begin to enjoy the taste of food without so much SOS. Another part of the story is dairy. And dairy, we have a reason for avoiding, as you saw in the posters that we passed around, for HIMSA reasons. High-fat dairy is linked with heart disease. Cheese is 75% saturated fat and lots of salt, and linked to prostate, breast, and ovarian cancer. Now, there is something called good fat, and omega-3 fatty acids are necessary for brain health and for heart health in our bodies, for proper functioning. The sources that are often promoted in conventional medical circles are shellfish based. They'll say that we need to have fish for DHA. There are sources of vegan and vegetarian ALA, which is alpha-linolenic acid, which goes through these 2 conversion steps and becomes DHA. This form of omega-3 fatty acid, EPA, is made in the body from ALA. So if we have alpha-linolenic acid from flaxseed, walnut, canola, or soybean oil, it gets converted to EPA and gets converted to DHA. And this has been traditionally the way that we vegans and vegetarians have gotten the good fats, through these sources. But recently, there's also DHA available from seaweed directly. So if you eat seaweed, you can get your DHA supplement from seaweed. So recommended foods for omega-3 fatty acids are flax oil, about 1 teaspoon a day, ground flax seeds, 1 to 2 teaspoons, walnuts, 2 to 3 tablespoons, or walnut oil, canola oil and soybean oil, a couple of tablespoons, also have omega-3. And surprisingly, though olive oil is being promoted as a health food, for omega-3, it doesn't actually have that much. Olive oil would need to be taken in high quantities, 15 to 30 tablespoons, and so is not really recommended as a source for omega-3 fatty acids. So people then ask, if you go from vegetarian to vegan, what about protein? What about calcium? You may have been asked as a vegetarian ad nauseum, how do you get your protein? And taking the step of going vegan often brings up more questions about calcium because people have been trained and educated from school that dairy is the best source of calcium. So both protein and calcium are found in plants. Good sources of calcium include green leafy vegetables. Spring greens and kale are excellent sources. We call them collard greens in the US. Mustard greens, broccoli, and okra. But certain greens that are healthy for other reasons, such as spinach has something called oxalate, which binds and prevents the calcium from being properly absorbed in your body. So eat a lot of this. This is healthy in many ways, but especially for calcium. Deposit in arteries or in kidneys, producing heart disease or kidney stones. Animal protein, as in milk, is linked to calcium loss, as well as fat and cholesterol that are risks for chronic diseases. So the theory is that if you take in animal protein, whether it's from meat or from milk, that's an acid source, and it needs a buffer, which can be calcium from the bones. It binds to the amino acids and the calcium bind together, and then they're excreted from your body. Human studies are variable, so we're not sure how far this theory is the case. You may read this in literature. So I'm of the opinion that we need to make sure that we get enough calcium from plant sources, that milk is not necessarily causing excessive loss, but it's not necessarily the source that you need, that you've been told that you need either, that you can get it from many other good sources.
Can I just ask, I was sort of, either through my sort of research, I thought almonds are a good source for calcium, and a sort of a rule of thumb was take sort of 10 almonds a day or 15, whatever it is, to get your baby.
Yeah, I mean, besides greens, there are a number of calcium-rich foods, including almonds, including even oranges. But sometimes the quantities that you would need to eat of these foods is kind of like in excess of what you actually could eat. Like you'd have to eat a lot of oranges. And almonds can be very heavy. So I'm kind of emphasizing here the really high concentration foods that you can consume, and it won't be really heavy for you. But there's actually a poster in the back and on the table right by where Gable is standing, and it has sources for macronutrients and minerals and micronutrients, including calcium. So this is just sort of a high-level overview, but there's certainly lots of sources, and you can put things together. You don't just have to eat greens all day. You can have unhulled sesame seed, tahini butter, you can have almonds, you can have your greens, you can have a calcium supplement. In the US, we have calcium-fortified orange juice. I'm not sure exactly what you have. You certainly have your whole range of calcium-fortified non-dairy milks. So putting it all together, the recommendation is that you get no less than 500 milligrams per day. People who had less than that had an increased risk of fractures in one of the studies that was done, the EPIC Oxford study. So I don't want to downplay the importance of calcium, as sometimes has been done on the basis of these animal studies with protein balance. But there's plenty of sources besides dairy. And there's other problems with dairy that we're going to go into. Oh, sorry, that's one more point here. So it's not just about calcium intake for bone health. Calcium needs to be balanced with other vitamins and minerals, so magnesium needs to be part of what you're having, vitamin K, boron, vitamin C. Exercise is really important, weight-bearing exercise. So classically, walking, weight training is considered very important to maintain bone health. And new research is showing that if you hold particular yoga poses more than 30 seconds, that also stimulates the bone growth. So make sure that you think about this holistically. It's not just about a single nutrient going in resulting in bone health. There's a whole mechanism that your body needs to keep things in balance. People are concerned about the harms of soy. Somehow they equate veganism with eating soy, and there's been a lot of information propagated in the press all over the world about how it might be harmful. whole soy products are not associated with this thing called isolated soy protein, which may increase insulin-like growth factor. Insulin-like growth factor can be linked to cancer. And where this isolated soy protein is found is fake meat stuff. You might find it in fake hot dogs, fake hamburgers. You might find it in energy bars and things like that. So a little bit is probably fine. Don't eat too much of this isolated soy protein stuff. But if you're having whole soy products, as they've been doing in China and Japan for thousands of years, tofu, soy milk, soy yogurt, and tempeh, they had it in Indonesia, which is a fermented soy food. All of those things are actually shown to be protective against heart disease and cancer. So those who have thyroid disease need to take special care to make sure that they get enough iodine and that they balance soy with other plant protein intake. Because there is a way that thyroid hormone gets affected by soy. You can have an increased uptake of iodine, so you need to make sure you're taking in enough iodine. And remember that the Indian diet has plenty of options not requiring soy analogs as meat substitutes. Veganism does not mean you have to eat soy. We have dal, we have other kators, we have a whole range of traditionally prepared foods. And even outside the Indian diet, there's a ton of other beans that you can have. So vary your diet. That's always a good principle. And for anybody who wants these slides, they're actually up on the website, Vegan Jain, so feel free to take pictures, but you can download the whole set and look at it at your leisure another time too.
I was just going to add one more thing, Fanny. For those who are doing sort of rigorous exercise and they want to sort of go into bodybuilding kind of issues, you can always take things like hemp or sort of yellow pea type of things, So I'm just saying.
Yeah, I agree. But I think
I'm just saying that people who might think, I need extra protein.
Yeah.
Where can I get it?
Yeah.
Hemp, yellow pea are good extra sources if you need it.
Yeah.
You don't need to, but I'm just saying, a lot of people might.
Yeah, and some studies have shown that that younger people who exercise might do better with a little extra protein. Older people who exercise actually don't do better with extra protein. So that even depends on your age and other things about your health status. And the other thing would be, rather than take a supplement powder or whatever format this protein is in, people who are bodybuilding, like seriously bodybuilding, they're using so much more energy that they can just eat more. So if you're eating more calories, you're eating more whole foods, then you're getting more of the other nutrients that are required to absorb and keep your body in balance. So take supplements if you think you need to, with caution, but eat more, I would say eat more whole foods.
Yeah.
Good balance, healthy balance is always good. Okay, so these slides talk about diabetes and obesity, and they focus on the U.S. I'm guessing that there's very similar things going on in the UK. I'll kind of go fast because this is to make the point, and I think it's similar for the UK, but they're not UK specific. So in 2010, 25.8 million people had diabetes, 18.8 million were diagnosed, 7.0 or 7 million had undiagnosed. And if you look together at the age-adjusted percentage of U.S. adults who were obese or had a diagnosis of diabetes, the red shows how obesity and diabetes are increasing over time. So they kind of go hand in hand. The yellow turns to red on both the top and the bottom sets of slides, showing how much obesity is linked to diabetes. So intake of certain dairy products, high-fat dairy products, increases risk of diabetes and weight gain. And so what do? Reduce the dairy, and then I'm going to talk to you more here about glycemic index. These slides are borrowed from someone from the American Diabetic Association. So think about if you have diabetes, or if you have it in your family, you want to reduce the risk of getting diabetes, think about eating in terms of a glycemic load. So I'll tell you about glycemic index and glycemic load. So factors influencing glycemic index, which is how fast your body absorbs sugar in what you're eating, include the following: the type of starch, the viscosity of the fiber, the sugar content, the fat content, the protein, acid content, cooking and food processing. So as an example of a high glycemic index food, if you have a candy bar, that's going to make your blood sugar go up high, and then you're going to crash. That's a high glycemic index food. A lower glycemic index food would be something like brown rice, because you have the starch in the rice, but you also have the fiber around the rice that makes it brown. And that means that your blood sugar rises a little bit more slowly, and it takes a little longer to fall. You can have a lower glycemic index if you have fat bound to a sugar or protein bound to a sugar. So you can have more healthy and less healthy ways of lowering the glycemic index of what you're eating. Depending on your health profile, it might be better for you to choose more fiber, less cooking, rather than adding fat or adding protein or something like that to decrease the glycemic index. This is a little bit complicated, so I'll just ask if anybody has any questions or if it needs to be clarified further.
Could you just clarify, did you say have less protein when you're...
If you want to raise the glycemic index, if you want to lower the glycemic index, you have to add protein. Yeah. Because it delays the absorption of the sugar. So your blood sugar is more steady. It rises more slowly and it falls more slowly. I might have said it backwards, so I apologize if I did. But yeah, so all of these things, the type of starch influences the GI, the type of fiber influences the GI. The more simple sugar, the higher the GI. The more fat and protein, the lower the GI. Cooking is going to make it higher. If you're cooking food, it makes it easier to digest, so your sugar is going to go up a little faster and come down a little faster. That doesn't mean everybody should eat everything raw, but just taking into account all the factors, these things affect the way that blood sugar goes up. And it's important, especially if you have diabetes or if you're having risk for diabetes. So benefits of a low glycemic index, documented benefits, yes. So lowering blood glucose levels, cholesterol levels, type 2 diabetes risk, decrease weight, and decrease heart disease risk. What should you eat to increase consumption of low GI foods? Eat high fiber breakfast cereals, or add berries, nuts, flaxseed, and cinnamons to high glycemic index cereals. So this is an example for breakfast what you might choose to do. For a meal that consists of rotli and vegetables and dal, for example. So instead of using white flour to make the flatbread rotli, you might use whole wheat flour as an example. How to increase consumption of low glycemic index foods? Choose dense whole grain and sourdough breads and crackers. This is using sort of Western examples. Or add a heart-healthy protein or condiment. So you might add flax oil to your kaka, make it a whole wheat kaka. That's an example of something from our diet. On the website, Vegan Jains, there is a handout by Asha Jain, who's a nutritionist that came to the Jaina convention a few years ago, and it lists the caloric and carbohydrate amounts of various foods, and it's posted with her permission. So not all the foods on the list are vegan, but it gives you an idea about glycemic index and what you can choose. So in the US, we have this recommendation to eat according to my plate. And I'd be interested if somebody can tell me what the UK is, but I'll tell you a little about this. It used to be we had the 4 food groups, and we had meat, we had dairy, we had fruits and vegetables, and we had breads and cereals. When I was growing up, that's what we had. And then we had the food pyramid, and at the bottom you had starches, and then you had fruits and vegetables, and then you had, dairy, and then you had like nuts and fats and oils or something like that. And so recently, just a couple years ago, and actually partly as a result of lobbying by the group Physicians Clinical Responsible Medicine, which promotes a plant-based diet, they came up with this, which you can see actually decreases the grain proportion to like 1/4. The grain used to be really high at the bottom. Increases the fruit and vegetables to like half your plate. Fruits is a quarter, vegetables a little more than a quarter. Protein is here. And they put dairy on, but this was a result of lobbying from the USDA, which represents dairy farming interests. So if the USDA was not driven by meat and dairy lobbyists, there would be no need for dairy on the plate. And if you like a milk substitute instead of this, you can use almond, soy, rice, hemp, or oat milk. So maybe I'll just stop for a second and say, what is the UK? Is there something like a nutritional recommendation, a template that's used here?
There is, but I'm not sure what that kind of pie chart would sort of look like.
Yeah.
I think we sort of split it into 3, I think,
Yeah.
rather than 4.
Yeah.
Generally sort of fruit, vegetables, a bit of protein, and I can't remember but I've seen it. I've seen it, but it's is it 5?
Yes, it's a lot more.
5 portions of?
But that's been there for quite a few years. 5 portions of fruit veg has been there for many years.
What meat or fish?
Sorry, fruit and vegetables.
Fruit and vegetables. And then how does that compare to everything else?
I think they're 5.
I think that it's split into 5. So fruit, vegetables, dairy, protein, and nuts and like nuts, seeds, oils, things like
They
that.
have fish as well, fish
In that category?
Yeah.
and eggs and all that.
And is it 5 equal portions?
No.
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 So fruit and vegetable is a bigger portion compared to carbohydrates and protein.
And how big of a portion is dairy?
I can't remember, but
Yeah.
it's
So anyway, when you see this, if you see this, look at the history of it, and think like I believe that in the U.S. we're very subject to lobbying. I don't know what the history is here, but you may just look into that and take it with a grain of salt, because usually these recommendations are not based solely on health research. They're based on economic conditions and lobbying, and so just consider that when you see what
And I
comes
think
out
that
of
the
the UK.
political kind of driving force here tends to be provide minimal. For example, fruit and veg, they might say eat 5 portions. So these are kind of minimalist issues rather than optimal. So the optimal might be say 10, but they'll say, oh, just have. So for a lot of people, if you give a hurdle of say 1 foot, they'll say that becomes my standard. I don't need to go up to 2. So a lot of people say, oh, I've had my 5. I don't need to work anymore. I can now have my junk.
Yeah.
You know. Because it's the kind of psychology which is going on.
Yeah, there's also this 5 a day for fruits and vegetables sort of promotion in the U.S. And if you're vegan, you're eating way more than 5 a day. Okay, somebody is showing me the Eat Well plate. Thank you very much. And so you have fruit and vegetables and bread, rice, potatoes, and pasta taking up way more than half the plate. And then you have milk and dairy and meat, fish, eggs, and beans, maybe like a quarter, well, less than a quarter. And then you have a little slice for foods and drinks high in fat and or sugar. So we don't even have foods and drinks high in fat or sugar as part of this, which is interesting. And it's a good idea. They say try to get this balance right every day, but you don't need to do it at every meal. So it seems to me this is a compromise. Why would you even include foods high in fat or salt if it was optimal? I think what you're saying about it being minimalist is a thing that people may think they can do rather than striving for optimal, maybe behind what you have here, or eat right.
Gina, sorry, just one little point maybe related to that. One thing that has happened in the last year or so in the UK, the National Health Service, which is you know about National Health Service, yeah? They got a website called nhsdirect.gov or something like that, or nhs.gov. Anyway, they've recently put up a section on veganism. So they talk about different diets, and they've even got a section on vegetarian and a section on vegan. And they talk, surprisingly, they're very positive about it. They talk in a balanced way. And they actually categorically say on there that a well-planned vegan diet is absolutely fine.
Great.
So that's something from a government body, which is quite an interesting development. So yeah, everyone can just look it up. If you look up the NHS website and then put in the search engine, write the word vegan, then you'll be surprised what comes up.
Thank you for that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so what led to that, it would be interesting to know about how that got onto the NHS site. There is something in the US, the American Dietetic Association put out a position paper also about the adequacy of vegetarian diets, including veganism, when they're well planned. Everybody talks about well planned as if you can eat what you want on non-vegan diets and be healthy without planning. I mean, to me, being healthy requires planning no matter what you're eating. But everyone seems to want to caveat that. So I think what we're seeing is that there's an acknowledgement, a growing acknowledgement that vegan diets are healthy, even though the standard recommendations might be blander and not as targeted towards covering veganism, vegetarianism. There's a large HMO in the US, a health maintenance organization called Kaiser Permanente, and they've recently come out with recommendations actually promoting veganism. So we're seeing increasing mention of and acceptance of, but still not quite mainstream. Oh, sorry. So veggie smoothies are a good way to get nutritious greens and vegetables and fruits in a single drink. So if you feel that it's hard for you to get kale and fruit in, eating them in the course of your regular meals, you can blend them in with something else. You can blend them together. You can blend them with a non-dairy milk and drink that in terms of support for people who are bodybuilding. This is an excellent way to replete any energy loss and mineral loss and keep yourself going. And just in general to meet calcium needs and other nutrient needs. This is a way that a lot of people get what they need from whole foods. There is a theory that it's a lot of dense material to digest, so sip it slowly, don't drink it all in one gulp. But other than that, I have not seen any recommendations that would suggest this is a problem. So think about this as something you can do.
Sorry, one question. With the fruits and that, they normally say with smoothies, it converts, when you squash it down
Yeah.
to make juice, it
Yeah.
converts into sugar. So you're drinking more sugar compared to the fruits you should be having. So you should be having like raw fruits rather than condensing it down.
So what
to
you're
juice.
saying is true for juicing, but it's not true for blending. When you juice a fruit, you're filtering out and you're removing the fiber. So like, for example, if you drink orange juice, you're taking all the fiber out, and you're just getting the concentrated sugar of juice. If you use a smoothie, you're retaining the fiber, you're just breaking it down. So in theory, there shouldn't be any consequence in terms of more sugar. It's definitely not more sugar. All the fiber's in there. There could be a little bit higher of a spike if you've broken down the cell walls. It could be that the blood sugar rises a little faster. So I would recommend not all fruit. But you're not losing all that fiber the way you would with juices.
So what kind of fruits would you put? Berries compared to like bananas or apples or anything? Or?
Some of it's per your taste, and you can also look at what's in season. Based on my tastes, berries are very high in anti-inflammatories. So I would, if you easily have berries available, I would put in berries. In California, we have strawberries and raspberries and blueberries over the summer, so it's great to use those. You can also find them frozen. Bananas always make something taste good. If you don't like the taste of bitter greens, blend in a banana and it's like palatable for everyone. So that's an easy one to throw in. Apples also can take out the bitterness of greens. Apple kale kind of smoothie tends to be a nice combination. Some people add ginger. If you have ginger, that's also really nice. And so it's really whatever you have on hand and whatever you like. Try different things out. You might find that certain combinations work better than others for you.
Can I just ask about kale? Would you blend that raw, or would you steam it slightly beforehand? Or?
I have a hard time eating raw kale, like in salads, but if I steam it and eat it, it's fine. When I put it into the blender to make a smoothie, raw is fine. Yeah, raw works fine. If you want to steam it, it's okay. But the blending actually makes it easier to digest.
Pick out all the stems. You just use the leaves, yeah?
Yeah. You remove the stems and you can use the leaves. And the other thing that I've been doing with you guys call spring greens, we call collard greens, is making patra out of it. So you remove the stems and you put a paste of chickpea flour and spices and you roll it up and you steam it. It's really good.
Could I just ask, like, how many people here regularly eat kind of the dark green leafy vegetables? So like the kales or the spring greens or those Savoy cabbage, and do you eat them regularly?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I would even say at least once a day. I would consider it like daily would be optimal. And more than once a day, even better. But I would say at least try to get it once a day.
What about parsley, coriander, things like that?
Those are good. They have iron and other nutrients. And you just can't eat them in big enough quantities to get enough calcium. Because those tend to be more like herbs, right? The difference between herbs and vegetables that you eat is how much you can eat. So things that you eat as herbs, you just can't get that much of it in there. And they're not particularly highly concentrated sources of calcium, so you have to eat a lot of it.
The other thing, all the greens in there, they are more fiber as well.
Yes.
So practically, one of my friends, she was saying that too much fiber is not even good for your body. So how does that work?
Well, generally, the problem with Western diets, and probably Indian diets as well, is not too much fiber, but too little fiber. You can have so much fiber that you're not used to that it takes a while for your digestive system to get used to. So, I mean, whenever you make a change in a diet, you can have too much for you to handle at that time. But overall, fiber is a very good thing. It helps move things through your system. It decreases the risk of colon cancer. It lowers the glycemic index of food. So it may be too much now. You may ramp up slowly. Some people have really hard time with digesting raw food. So take it over time if that's the case. But in general, I would say, no, it's not too much fiber. It's actually really good for you to have that.
So it doesn't affect the kidneys in any way at all?
The kidneys are not harmed by fiber at all. The kidney's job is to filter the blood and excrete the waste in urine. Fiber doesn't impact the kidneys at all. It's the colon that has to work.
Can spring greens be eaten raw?
Spring greens, they can be eaten raw. Some people make rolls out of them. They put different fillings in and they actually roll them up. Personally, I have a hard time digesting it raw, but if you can eat it raw, it's fine. You sort of have to see what works with your system. I like to steam them because I think it makes it easier to chew and it's a little bit more digestible. Asking about raw, so some people will say definitely eat raw. There's a whole raw vegan food movement. What are the benefits? It's lower glycemic index. It does retain the nutrients in some foods, but other nutrients are less digestible. In tomatoes, for example, cooked tomatoes have a higher lycopene level, which is protective for men, so they don't develop prostate cancer. They haven't shown the same benefits with raw tomatoes. And the other thing that comes up is in broccoli and cauliflower, there are substances that are considered goitrogens. They're linked to thyroid disease when eaten raw. But if you cook them, that actually is fixed, so you don't have the same problems with cooked broccoli and cauliflower. If you have thyroid disease, you probably don't want to eat too much, but cooking actually makes that better. So
cooked carrots are better than reducing them?
Cooked carrot, I believe there's a British expression called killed carrots. I don't actually know of any benefit to cooking carrots. Yeah, I think it's fine raw, whatever you like. And then most scientists consider boiling and steaming to be good methods of food preparation. And that some of the raw food advocates suggest that there's enzymes in the food that's preserved if you don't cook it. But the amount of digestive enzymes in your body is actually much greater than that. So if you boil and you steam, it's actually okay. But frying and broiling and baking can be problematic for lots of reasons. So baking can produce something called,
What was broiling?
what?
Frying and broiling. What's broiling?
Broiling, okay, so this is, I should have been saying boiling and steaming.
Yeah.
But broiling is when they put at a high heat, like usually meat or something is broiled at high heat.
Yeah, okay.
Baking produces advanced glycosylation end products, age, and that can damage the eye and it can damage other organs in the body. So I know we all eat baked goods, but in terms of the research, using water to break down the cell walls by boiling or steaming is healthy. The oil is not so healthy, and really high heat is not so healthy.
Can I just ask a question about using, say, the microwave for the purpose of breaking down the food from raw to digestible?
So microwaving, I haven't seen research on it. I know some people are very cautious. It activates cooking via the water in the food. I can't really speak to that because I don't have any research showing that it's healthy or unhealthy at this point. But people have concerns, and from a non-Western scientific methodology, I think I've heard from people who believe in Ayurveda that it destroys the prana in the food. I don't know. I'm not going to say yes, not going to say no. I don't know about that.
A microwave usually what it does is vibrates the water molecules within the food and naturally cooks the food. It doesn't do anything else.
Yeah.
It vibrates the water molecules really fast, and that's how it cooks the food.
So what do you think in terms of healthy or unhealthy?
I think it's healthy.
Healthy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Gina, what about the effect of heat on vitamin C? Is vitamin C destroyed?
The effect of?
Heat on vitamin C.
You know, I haven't really looked at that, but I don't know of any problems with cooking on vitamin C in vegetables. With fruit, we don't tend to cook it, so it's not an issue. Like we tend to have oranges and grapefruit and stuff, which have vitamin C raw anyway. We don't tend to cook it. I haven't seen anything suggesting that the vitamin C in, for example, red bell peppers or, what do you guys call them? You don't call them bell peppers.
Capsicums.
Capsicums. I haven't seen that that's destroyed by heat. So, yeah.
You were mentioning the flaxseed and walnut oils earlier.
Yeah.
How about heat and
Heat does destroy omega-3s. That is a problem. You should not heat flax oil. That is actually a problem. Yeah.
What about in rapeseed oil? So their recommendations that if you want to get omega-3, perhaps use rapeseed oil as a cooking oil because it's got good cooking qualities and it's also it's got a fairly neutral flavour.
Right.
Are the omega-3s in that stable, or do they get affected by heat as well?
I would think that they are affected, but not completely destroyed. That would be my perception, because I don't know why the percentage of ALA that's in rapeseed or canola would react any differently than flax. But I think that some percentage still make it through, and so they're saying, well, at least there's some ALA in canola or rapeseed, so use that rather than olive, which has so little that you have to have 15 to 20 tablespoons. But there would be no reason to believe that it's more heat stable within that oil than flaxseed or linseed.
so would you recommend canola oil instead of olive oil as a salad dressing?
Salad dressing is different than cooking. For salad dressing, I would say flax oil if it's not, prohibitively expensive. For cooking, I would say canola oil. And olive oil only for if you really like the taste and for special dishes occasionally. So that's another whole thing. It's been promoted as part of the Mediterranean diet. People are attributing a lot of benefits to the Mediterranean diet, but if you look at the studies, usually what they're comparing is the Mediterranean diet with olive oil against sort of a standard Western diet. There is not the comparison of a plant-based diet, which I think is even better and doesn't need that olive oil to improve on the standard Western diet.
What about coconut oil? Because I think right now there's quite a huge promotion on
Coconut oil. Well, I know some people, Jyoti has used coconut oil and it's raised her HDL level.
Quite a lot. So
A
much
lot.
so, not a surprise, yes.
There are different schools of thought on this. I'll tell you my school of thought, and I will acknowledge that, for her, she feels things are better. So my school of thought on this is that coconut oil can raise both HDL and LDL. It does raise saturated fat. The ratio of cholesterol to LDL seems to be more important than the total saturated fat. Like we used to think saturated fat in itself was really, really important. And the ratios tend to be a little bit worse with coconut oil as compared to, say, rapeseed oil or canola oil. So there's also some thought about medium-chain triglycerides being healthy in coconut oil, but it's actually not that big of a component of coconut oil. Personally, I don't use coconut oil much. I would rather cook with rapeseed or canola oil. But if it comes occasionally in Thai food or something like that, I eat it. I don't think it's something to completely avoid. And I will have the occasional piece of coconut. I think it's fine. I think that part of the reason it's being promoted is because it's shelf stable. So manufacturers can produce things that'll be on the shelf for a long time. And they also are able to charge more for it than they do for something like rapeseed oil. So is it really bad? No, depends on your risk profile. If you have heart disease, I might stay away from it. If you're generally healthy, I might be okay with a small amount. I wouldn't use it as an everyday cooking oil. And so I think, for example, naturopaths and others with different philosophies may say, oh, that should be your cooking oil, because they think that actually rapeseed oil is problematic. So you'll hear different opinions of this. This is mine, based on what I've seen and what I've learned and the people that I've discussed this with, nutritionists and other physicians.
So would you say that coconut milk is a little bit less healthy for the same reason?
I would. Yeah, I would. Occasional dishes, if you want to use it for taste, it's fine. You know, party, sweet, whatever, but I wouldn't use it as an everyday.
It's too fattening at the same time.
It is fattening.
Yeah, the green coconut, the malai or the white meat inside green coconut, that is very fattening. But the brown coconut, that's very different. I eat more of the brown coconut. I hardly ever have the meat of the green coconut, the fleshy white part of the green coconut. I don't eat that.
So we're getting into now beyond veganism. We're talking about details. You know, I would personally say I'd rather have you have almond milk or soy milk or hemp milk or oat milk than coconut milk. But you know, each person has their own risk profile and their own experience. Do your research. I'll give you some guidelines to start with.
And I was just wondering, to what extent do we actually need to have refined oils in our diet? So there are lots of fats in nuts and seeds, but they also contain a lot of other really useful nutrients. That actually, if you take sunflower oil, there's loads of stuff in the seeds. You just extract the oil and get rid of all the fiber and all the other nutrients. So how much oil do we actually need in our diet?
You need none, actually. And that's a really good point to raise. So Caldwell Esselstyn's program to reverse heart disease recommends no oil, plant-based. That you get all the fat that you need from whole nuts, avocado, and even that, for people who have heart disease, you want to even minimize all that. But basically, you don't really need any oils. It's only if you think that you want to prepare something that you can't do any other way that you could use them. But you can prepare salad dressings, for example, you know, with tahini and lemon and some herbs. You can prepare, I prepare most of my vegetables by water sauteing, putting a little water in with the vegetables, closing the cover, and it breaks down the cell walls and it softens things up, and I add whatever spices that I want to add on top of that. I don't stir fry anymore. I used to as a college kid, but I don't never stir fry anymore, hardly ever.
Usually, yeah, I don't stir fry either. If I actually want oil, and that's maybe once or twice a week, I might put a teaspoon or something like that once the vegetables are cooked, when we're ready to eat.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I don't actually stir fry anymore.
Yeah, and actually, you know, there was a series of health education materials that was actually produced in the UK. I did a Master's of Public Health degree in 1999-2000, and my master's thesis was on heart disease in South Asian Americans. And this series of publications actually recommended what you said for Indian food, where people feel like it's essential to have some oil for the taste, that they just add it at the end.
Yeah.
So that's another option if you feel like you need it. But that's for taste, let's be clear. You don't need it for your body. You can get the fat that you need from whole food sources. If you want it for taste and you know, you want to just add some at the end, you can add some at the end, but you don't even really need that.
So how do you do burger? You know, we do burger with lye and Gino. How do you do that?
I do dry burger. I don't use anything in a hot pan. I just do the rye juice and just add the vegetables.
Oh, I see.
It's really because the flavor of the jiru and rye come out as long as the pan's hot.
Oh, I see.
Thank you.
No.
What other ways do we need oil in Indian cooking? Because that's something that it's very hard for me to address. I don't do as much traditional cooking. I work with my parents, to reduce, but they have a hard time giving up the oil. So that's a good hint.
People find two things very difficult. One is in shaks or shabjis, and the other one is they always want to add oil to the roti no ato, the flour, the dough. They always want to add oil to that.
But you have to, isn't it? To make
No, you
it
don't.
soft?
I make atta without.
Yeah, so in my family, we have different kinds of bread. So roti is the whole wheat flour.
Yeah.
My mom just always uses water for that.
Yeah, same.
So for us, for our family, and my family has diabetes in our history, so we don't add sugar to dals and things that most Gujarati families add. So that's kind of always been out of our family cooking tradition. But we haven't been adding water to roti. But we do make my parents do make debra or tepla, which has greens in it. So it's kind of nice in a way. You're adding greens to your bread. But I don't know how to do that without oil, actually.
You can
I
do
do
it
that,
without
like-
oil.
Yeah?
Just do them in the frying pan
Yeah.
and just make them soft and just dry them. Don't
That's
put any oil at all.
So
Just
I
do
tried
them
it.
like rotis.
Yeah, I tried that, and then my parents said, oh, it's too stiff. So it's a little difference in
Okay,
texture.
so yes, you have to make it a little bit softer
Yeah.
and then just cover it as soon as they've been fried.
Yeah,
I mean roasted. And they stay very nice.
great. Thank you. And the other thing you said besides the atta was, oh, and on top. So on top, if you really absolutely must put some fat on top of your roti or whatever, flax oil. But you can eat it without it, and it's fine. Samosas we bake if we eat them.
Yeah, I make bhajias baked.
But just a lot of stuff can be baked.
Yeah.
You know, and baking isn't the best, but it's better than frying.
Yeah.
So just to have that crunchy texture. Next thing, organic. So this is a big deal in California. Everybody's like interested in organic, and we can get a lot of organic because it's a, you know, culturally in California, it's part of our the definition of desirable food. In my opinion, it is better than conventional. There is a ahimsa to workers and to insects because the pesticides that are used in conventional do affect the workers. There's a host of illnesses that they're susceptible to. And if you're applying pesticides, you're also killing the insects en masse. It also can affect all of us in what we're eating. It's not always free of animal matter, though. They do use animal bone and animal blood in organic food. So I wish that there was more veganic, which is organic, not using animal products to grow the food. And some studies have shown better nutritional value of organic. And Sagar wrote an interesting post on his blog connected to Jain Vegans. Maybe you can just say a little bit about your recommendations about this.
So, so in the UK, there exist a couple of, they're called either stock-free or veganic farms, where rather than using, so for organic farming, it's sort of crushed up bones and blood they use as an alternative sort of organic fertilizer as opposed to ones that are derived from petrochemicals. So essentially you've got two options. Either you can go to a stock-free organic farm. They're a bit hard to get hold of in London, but there's some nearby in Oxfordshire where you can get a box scheme. So essentially they will deliver, if you're close enough, you can deliver vegetables to your home, fruit and vegetables from them to your home. And if there are enough people getting together and wanting to do it in London, we'll probably be able to organise one. The second thing is to just grow your own vegetables. So if you are growing your own vegetables, you're in control over actually what goes into the soil. And you can actually, I think it's great to get outside, take notice of what's going on in your garden, to learn about what things are in season, what things aren't in season, the types of things that actually end up getting imported and the types of things that grow in the UK. But to also just, be more aware of the food that you're eating, exactly kind of where it comes from. So you can be sure that your personal ethical standards are met if you're growing your own vegetables. Obviously, the amount of food we eat over the course of the year and the size of people's garden, you're not going to make everything, but every little helps.
And you learn a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Where I live, I don't have a yard that I can plant in. We bought these big, wine is a big deal in California, so we have these half wine barrels, so it doesn't have any wine anymore, and we've put dirt in it, and we've been able to grow a big plant of tree collards, which you might call spring greens. And then we planted some other things around it, some strawberries and tomatoes and things like that. And you just learn a lot about how things grow and have an appreciation of what you're eating. And it's an interesting thing that Jains traditionally haven't farmed. I find it a little bit of a contradiction that we want other people to do it for us. I think if we do it mindfully, it's actually very good for us.
Just to add about on the subject of veganic farming. So I think the farm that Sagar was referring to is called Tolhurst Organics, and it's near Reading, in a town called Pangbourne, I think. So if you try and remember that Tolhurst Organics, they do have guided tours, I think. So it's a very interesting place to visit, and just to see how they manage to grow all their crops so well using completely non-animal fertilizers and crop rotations and natural controls and things like that. So
action point for us would be to next time there's an open day to circulate it on our distribution list. I imagine most people found out about the event because you're already on our newsletter. So anyway,
Cool.
carry on.
Yeah, new to do that, and I think maybe for me, in California, there's a place, it's called Animal Place. It's a shelter that takes in animals that have been rescued, and they've started growing their own food, and they deliver what they call it is CSA, Community Supported Agriculture. So they deliver boxes to people in the local area, so you can get veganic. Unfortunately, I'm just far enough away that I don't qualify, but it's one of those things that I think would be good to visit, and when I do go, I would get stuff from them. So yeah, whatever you have here, take advantage and check it out. It'd be
In this
great.
country, there are 3 vegetables that if anybody has even a postage size garden can grow very easily without much care. And that's runner beans, peas, and French beans. They would just grow, and that's it. I mean, I have tons growing in my garden.
Yeah,
And they're very good for you because it's all green.
yeah. Thank you. Anybody else have any gardening experience they want to share?
We have a little bit of information here on stop-free farming, and Tolhurst is mentioned on here and the website, so at the end you can pick up some.
So, now we come to what you have to be careful about. Whether you're vegetarian or vegan, we come to things that you should supplement because of our modern lifestyles. Vitamin B12, as a vegetarian or a vegan, you need to supplement B12. You should get your levels checked. If you're young and healthy, you should be able to orally supplement. What I've noticed in the boxes of non-dairy milks that are displayed here is that the amount that's in there is not enough. It's like 15% of your daily value. So you can't rely on what's in the non-dairy milks. The Vegan Society makes a vegan multivitamin that has B12, and I'm sure there's some other supplements that are out there. So I would suggest that you have a reliable source of a supplement. If you take a supplement and your blood levels are still low, especially if you're older, if you have any disease in your GI tract, then you might need an injection. And it's a very small proportion, and I would say injections have probably been overused. In India, people used to get injections because of that, they thought it gave them energy. In the 50s and 60s in the US, injections were overused. There's a certain proportion of people that need it though. And for the people that need it because they have problems with absorption, get it. It's better than having the diseases that come with B12 deficiency, which includes something called pernicious anemia, affects your nervous system, affects your bloods, and also you can have an increased risk of heart disease because B12 is needed in a metabolic pathway that if it's not activated properly will elevate your homocysteine, which leads to heart disease. So do make a point to get enough B12. Elderly vegetarians in India were found to be B12 deficient. So it's not just a vegan issue, but it's especially a vegan issue because B12 is only found in foods of animal origin. And they can manufacture it with bacteria, and you can take it in a supplement form, and B12 supplementation is the best way to ensure that we don't get these conditions that I was talking about, the pernicious anemia, the heart disease, and
Can I ask
myelin
about
diseases. Commonly thought to be a problem with vegetarians, no more so with vegans than with vegetarians in general. And this is because heme iron is available in meat, which is easily absorbed. For men, it's actually a problem. They have a risk of getting iron overload. Because men don't lose blood every month, they actually risk getting too much iron, which is a risk for a bunch of different health issues, including heart disease. For women who lose blood every month, and so if they haven't reached menopause yet and they're menstruating, it can be an issue in general for people to get enough iron. But the same dark leafy vegetables, dark leafy green vegetables that we talked about that give you calcium, plus others, will keep your iron levels high and healthy as well. So in addition to the kale and the spring greens that we talked about earlier, and actually broccoli, which is also a pretty good source of calcium, and other greens like that, there are other greens that have a high level of oxalate, such as spinach and beet greens, that are actually good sources of iron, even though they're not good sources of calcium, because the oxalate doesn't interfere with the iron. The other thing is, if you cook in a cast iron pot, that can help increase the iron. And if you have vitamin C, something containing vitamin C along with your iron-containing food, that can increase the absorption of iron.
I've heard drinking tea or coffee while you're having those foods can be detrimental towards absorption as well.
I thought it was only tea rather than coffee, but
I don't know,
Yeah,
actually.
but
I'm not the expert.
No, just say.
Okay.
Tea definitely, you know.
Yeah. I don't know for sure about the coffee, so I have heard about the
I'm
tea.
probably wrong.
I've heard bran flakes is a very good source of iron as well.
There are a number of sources. Maybe right behind you, read off what it says about iron. I'm sort of saying the high impact, but right behind you there's a bunch of stuff about iron.
It says tofu, beans and pulses, spinach, cabbage, wheat germ, all grains,
Emerging good.
parsley, prunes and dates, dried apricots, pumpkin seeds, millet, blackstrap, molasses.
Yeah, blackstrap molasses is an unusual one actually. It has some iron too. There's a woman who had cancer and became a marathon runner. Her name is Ruth Hydrick. She became sort of world class late in life. And for her breakfast drink every morning, she takes 2 tablespoons of blackstrap molasses and mixes it into water. It has a little bit of the bitterness people like from coffee, but the sweetness of molasses, and that helps her with her iron. And then vitamin D. So this is a problem with modern lifestyles because we're inside so much of the day. And even when we're outside, the sun may not be at a high enough angle in northern latitudes such as here, and even in Northern California, for us to get adequate sun exposure. And on top of that, we're usually fully clothed. We're not usually running around in shorts and a tank top or whatever, you know. So we have widespread vitamin D deficiency in the population as a whole. People who consume dairy may be getting it supplemented in their milk. If we cut out milk, we need to get the supplement in something else. It could be in our non-dairy milk. It could be in our vitamin, like the ones that's going around. And traditionally, D2 has been vegan. D3 has not, but there's a lichen source D3 called VitaShine that's produced by the Vegan Society. And this one is a good source of D3. The difference between the two is that D3 is the form that's usually found in animals. The previous source of D3 was lanolin from sheep's wool. And it was thought to be better utilized in the body because it doesn't involve a liver and kidney conversion step. So if you're concerned about your D3, you know, about your D level and you want to use D3, and you want to use a plant-based source, get this. For me personally, D2 works when I take it. I have to take probably higher doses than I might have to for D3, but it works just fine. D2 tends to be a little bit less expensive. See what you need to do. Get your levels checked, and then you can see what works for you.
What if you're allergic with lanolin? What happens then?
What if you?
If you've got allergy with lanolin?
Well, so this is not lanolin. Lanolin isn't vegan. So this is lichen, which is a plant.
Okay.
Yeah, so avoid the lanolin-based stuff for allergic reasons or for ahimsa reasons if you want to avoid product made from sheep that are harmed in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a side, so when my brother went to go and get vitamin D tested, his doctor, actually his GP, told him there's no point getting tested. 95% of the UK population are vitamin D deficient. We just don't spend enough time in the sun. Yeah, like you're just going to get told that you're deficient. So I don't see the point in doing the test. You might as well take a supplement anyway.
But to me, the point is to know if the supplement's working. You want to know where you start.
Precisely.
And then you see if it's working.
So, I mean, I would, you know, if you go and visit your GP for any other reason, ask if you can get a vitamin D test if you're concerned. Most of us are dark-skinned and don't spend enough time in the sun unless you're fortunate enough to go on several holidays to sunny places for a lot of the time. And if not, like regardless of whether you start a vegan diet or not, just think about taking a supplement.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in the U.S. they're saying at least 50% of people here, and since it's smaller and northern latitude uniformly, it's 90%, which is kind of amazing levels of D deficiency. And it's good that you mentioned the skin also. So white-skinned people need to be out in the sun for like 15 to 20 minutes. Medium-skinned people, half an hour. You know, darker-skinned people, even longer. This is like full-body exposure. Some people consider hands and face, or arms and face. I've read full-body exposure, so it's kind of a lot, you know, for every day at the times of year when the sun is right above you, so you get enough D. So I would just say supplement. And you know, there's some research suggesting that it's preventing other chronic diseases. I'm not sure that I buy all that, but at least for bone health, it's important that you get vitamin D so that you have adequate calcium absorption, so that you don't have the risk for osteoporosis.
As a rule of thumb, oh sorry. I was going to say, as a rule of thumb for spending time in the sun, if your shadow is longer than your body, basically you're not actually getting enough sun to create vitamin D. And for the kind of the winter in the UK, actually, yeah, basically we've got the problem of dark skin plus not getting enough sun. Yeah, the chances are you won't be making any at all.
And if you wear sunscreen, you're blocking that as well. You're blocking the UV. And if you're an Indian woman who's been told all her life that light is beautiful and dark is not, then you're not going to get enough heat. You're not going to be out in the sun.
But the other thing, if you don't wear a sun protector or sunblock, then you're going to cause anti-aging to your skin.
So my solution to that is you can put some on your face, and the other parts of your body leave without sunscreen.
You're going to cause what? What did you say?
The aging, because we don't really see the aging effects on your arms, your legs, and other parts of your body. You might see it in wrinkles around your face.
Sorry, I don't use anything. I'm 53 years old.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I don't
52.
use anything.
Yeah.
I don't
So
even
you don't
use
really need
moisturizers.
Yeah, but I'm saying if you're concerned, you can put it on your face. You certainly don't need it on any other part of your body.
Can I just ask about doses in terms of vitamin D? What would you say would be a good dose for people with Indian skin? Because I heard that if you have too much vitamin D, it can be detrimental to your health.
So this varies a lot. In the US, the recommended standard daily dose is 800 international units, and I think you guys even did different units than we did, but 800 international units is what the standard recommendation is, but most researchers believe it should be at least 2,000 international units. So go with your national standard recommendation, get your levels checked, and then it might need to be a little higher.
So what are the symptoms of less vitamin D3 or vitamin D in general?
So you won't feel anything in the short term, but what it does is it affects your bone health in the long term. You could have an increased risk of osteoporosis, fracture, etc. Sometimes you could feel pain, muscle pains, etc.
Yes.
But you might not know it's D related. You might just think you have big muscle pains.
We have a cousin who was really short, deficient in D, and he had really bad pains in his arms, and he was a very physical worker, and he was thinking he's getting very old and aging, and his doctor found out that he's short in vitamin D.
Yeah.
And they gave him boosters, and within 3 or 4 weeks, he was like back to normal.
Yeah, so that's the issue, is that because muscle pain is so non-specific, you might not link it to D.
Yeah.
Nobody might link it to D. But it may in fact be improved when you replete your D. And then the long-term thing is also really important. The long-term improvement in your bone health is actually a good reason also for D.
Can it make a difference to a condition we have here called SAD, seasonal adjustment disorder, where people get a little bit, apparently they get a bit depressed in the winter because the nights are, crazy and...
As far as I know, the D itself doesn't help as much as actual sunlight, or there's light lamps that have full spectrum light. As far as I know, the D itself doesn't necessarily help with that. And I'm not sure if I have this on a slide, it's on a vitamin, but calcium is also important. In the vegan literature in the past, people used to cite studies that showed that if you had a diet high in sulfur amino acids, which are found in animal protein, animal products, I should say, it's like milk and meat, that your body would bind that with calcium that you take in and excrete it so that you actually wouldn't absorb it well. We're not sure if that's true in human studies. So I can't hang my hat and say just because you're not having dairy that your calcium balance is going to be better. Studies have actually found, a big Oxford study in the UK has found that vegans eating less than 500 milligrams of calcium a day are at increased risk of fracture. So do make sure that you get enough calcium. We talked about it a little bit earlier, right? So dark green leafy vegetables, supplements, other sources like we talked about. Do make sure, because it works together with the D for bone health. So circling back to it because of the bone health issue.
Do you have to take the two together, or does it matter if you have it at separate times in the day?
It's okay to take it at separate times during the day, but you want to make sure that you're taking enough calcium and your D level is adequate. So calcium, try to divide up if you are taking a large dose, but I personally take one 500 milligram tablet, and I take D at one point during the day. Calcium you do want to take with meals.
Jina, sorry to bother you. We've got about half an hour or so left. So it's very interactive as it is.
Yeah.
So Do you want to carry on like this? In this
I don't
way,
think I have
or-
too many more actually.
Okay, and then
So
we
we
can
yeah, we
kind
can
of
carry
open it
on
up.
with this.
Yeah.
I'm happy for the interaction. Yeah.
Which calcium supplement is it calcium carbonate?
So calcium citrate is supposed to be the best absorbed. Calcium carbonate can be from it's hard to dolomite, So you can have it. You can have it from oyster shell, and you can have it from. It's hard for me to explain the source exactly, but it's sort of like chalk. And the chalk form is actually vegan, and the dolomite, the oyster. I think the dolomite is the chalk actually. The oyster calcium is not vegan. So I can't tell you exactly what the brands are here and exactly what's recommended, but I would go for the calcium citrate or the other calcium that's now on a very physical level. From a moral, spiritual, ethical level, you're less likely to overeat. You're likely to really think about what you're doing and what's driving your eating if you're slowing down and consider what we're actually doing when we're eating. You will eat less and enjoy more with better nutrition when you slow down. There's a tradition of Buddhism that is guided by Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a monk from Vietnam, and his community of mindful living has developed these 5 contemplations. I meditate with this community, so I'm familiar with this, and I find it really helpful and extremely consistent with Jainism. So the contemplations go like this. This food is the gift of the earth, the sky, numerous living beings, and much hard work. When we eat with mindfulness, may we eat with mindfulness and gratitude so as to be worthy to receive it. So we're acknowledging that, we're taking life here. May we recognize and transform our unwholesome mental formations, especially our greed, and learn to eat in moderation. May we keep our compassion alive by eating in such a way that we reduce the suffering of living beings, preserve our planet, and reverse the process of global warming. We accept this food so that we may nurture our sisterhood and brotherhood, strengthen our son, and nourish our ideal of serving all beings. So, this might not be the wording that works for you. You may choose to develop something else, but I urge you to slow down and think about the context of us eating and what we're doing as human beings and what it means. And I think it will make eating and living a little bit more meaningful.
I just wanted to ask, has anyone here tried eating in silence before? Yeah. Okay, so a couple of people. So I went on a meditation retreat in December last year. And normally when I eat at home, what I either do, I'm either sitting down talking, I'm either watching TV, or I'm reading something at the same time. And then I'm not really thinking, although I'll be thinking about the food, or if I go out to a restaurant, I'll be talking. I'll be generally having a conversation with someone. So I went to a meditation retreat, and there it was actually completely silent for 10 days, but you just sit down, and in the hall, it'd be complete silence. And because you're eating in silence, and you're trying to kind of concentrate and be reflective, you actually just take a lot more time to think about everything that's on your plate, the process of chewing everything properly when you're swallowing it. And I found that the amount I ate went down by about kind of 66, went down by about a third. So what I found is that I started noticing when my body was actually beginning to feel full. And what I noticed, as soon as the silence ended, we had one day when there wasn't silence, started talking again because I was really eager. I like to talk, and I was really eager to talk, to share the experiences of other people. And all of a sudden, I was eating much more. We're only having 2 meals a day on the course, and it was completely fine. But as soon as we got out, on the 3rd meal, I was just eating loads again. So if you want to try eating mindfully, just try having a meal where you're just in silence and you're focusing on your food, and experiment and see how it works for you.